my god! Oh my god! I've died many times in hardcore, so you don't have to. Here are 4 essential tips for you to survive your hardcore journey. The first, and in my opinion, the most important piece of your hardcore success is know the content. Know the fights that you're going into, understand the boss mechanics, understand different monster affixes and their skill sets, as well as any environmental traps. There were plenty of times where, for example, I may have killed a rare pack, felt victorious, and then I all of a sudden died because I wasn't familiar with something like a molten affix, where the monster will explode on death with a ton of damage. This can include things like knowing the damage types of different bosses. If one does lightning, one does poison or shadow or frost, so you can preemptively prepare your gear to nullify as much as possible those damage types. That being said, I do not recommend hardcore being your first choice of character, because encountering some of those bosses, especially in higher difficulties, you are going to die if you're not very well prepared. And if you don't know what you're doing going in, you're not prepared, and you don't know the mechanics, 1, you're not going to have the required resistances, and 2, because you're not familiar with the fight, you are going to get hit. So I highly recommend playing a softcore playthrough first, rather than losing your hardcore character, because trust me guys, you just saw the clip reel, it does take the wind out of you. Now, beyond just understanding fight mechanics and what certain monsters or certain bosses do, it's also important to understand the game's different systems. How can you get the gear required for you to mitigate some of the damage that these encounters deal? What are the different systems in the game? Are there crafting systems? Are there certain builds that are better, more defensive for hardcore? Like different gems that you can put into your gear? What are the different ways you can enchant your gear to better survive or get that bit of damage you need to ensure your survival by killing a boss or a monster quick enough that it doesn't use certain abilities? That leads me to the next tip, which is play defensively. When you're playing softcore, you can take risks. Like you can say, oh, I'm going to run the highest difficulty Nightmare Dungeon. Or if you're playing LastEpoch, the highest monolith that I can do. I do not recommend you take that approach. My approach that I feel like has worked well is I always want to be around 4 higher levels or better prepared than the content that I'm doing. So Diablo 4 has that scaling mechanism for leveling. But if you're playing a game like LastEpoch, Diablo 2 Resurrected, or PathofExile, zones do have a level range, and I always recommend 3 or 4 if you can, above the content of that zone, just to keep yourself a little bit safe and say, you know, you do have that momentary lapse and you do get hit by a punishing mechanic that you aren't going to get one shot. This also means when you're putting points into different skill trees, that maybe you build your skills more defensively, or you make sure to have 1 or 2 defensive cooldowns more than you usually run with. This may also include, say you typically socket your gear with gems that are more offensive. Instead, think about replacing them with those that increase your survivability. This leads me into my 3rd tip to surviving hardcore, which is play a tankier class or spec. Especially if it's your first time, hardcore requires a level of awareness that you're not going to have playing softcore because the stakes aren't as high. So I recommend playing a tankier build that has, invulnerability options or very high mitigation options where you can slip up here and there, but you're not going to instantly get flatlined. So I wouldn't choose any glass cannon builds or builds that forgo any defensive skills or abilities. Once you're a lot more familiar with the content, and you want to make things interesting for yourself, that's something that I did back in Diablo 3. I ended up playing a demon hunter for a season, and I got to the front stage of the ladder rankings. I can't remember off the top of my head. It was a bit back. I remember I was right up there with your boy Leviathan, so I definitely have experience playing hardcore very competitively. And that being said, when you are playing at that competitive level and you want to stay relevant throughout an entire season, you cannot skip the next tip, which is the most important. And that is tip number 4, prepare to die. It doesn't matter how good you are in hardcore, you can always have a momentary lapse of judgment, or you can get trapped by a nasty affects like a Waller, for example, in Diablo, and then all of a sudden be flatlined. That happened to me numerous times in that competitive season that I was speaking of in Diablo 3. And the way I was still able to stay competitive and not just lose my ranking on the ladders is create a backup plan. Expect that there's a high chance that you're going to die, so that if you get duplicates for the gear set that you're using, store those. Now, for games like LastEpoch and PathofExile, I believe that once your hardcore character dies, instead of losing that character like you do in Diablo 4, it gets turned into softcore. Now, there's a plus and minus side to this. The plus side is you could continue using that character. The downside is, however, is that since that character is now softcore, everything in that shared stash is now for softcore characters only. So the way to get around that is to create alts in hardcore that you instead leave those items with. So you always want to be preparing, level up an alt, level up another character, get them, maybe 50% of the way there, so that if you do die, or when you do die, which is the mindset I go into when I play hardcore, I'm not going to have to start from the absolute bottom and climb my way up. And the benefit there too is that you get more familiar with that content. So maybe down the line, you want to try it in the next season or the next league or the next cycle, you'll have enough reps in where you could go in and just unconsciously take on these difficult mechanics that you had to focus on before. And frankly, I want to end this tip by saying it's important to get it in your mind that this character may be lost, because you are going to invest time in it. And if you get too attached to that character and you lose it, I've had friends who just flat out quit the game and didn't return until a league or two later. So to avoid that, create some level of distance and just prepare and accept the fact that you may lose this character. You may get demotivated if you do lose your character, but give it a day or two and you'll be back in the running. Now, thank you all for tuning in. I hope this advice was helpful. Now, one thing that I do want to mention is that I do stream on Twitch multiple days a week. You can find the link in my YouTube profile and in the description below. Now, my first 50 followers and subsequent subscribers, we're almost there, guys, will get shout outs in my YouTube videos. And that being said, we have a lot of people to shout out today, so let's get right to it. Thank you, The Roshman. Thank you, Blue Arowana. Fancy David, thank you. Danny Daniels, thank you. Kara Burns, thank you for the follow. Damn Smith, thanks for the follow, really appreciate it. Dr. Smith, you're the doctor to my heart, thank you for following. Man Ray DS, you are the man, thanks for the follow. Jude Scott, great Scott, thank you for the follow. Oh, that was lame. Scuffed, thank you for the follow. Slick Wicked, wicked of you to follow, man, thank you. Eric Steinhauer, hopefully there's a lot of people named that, but thank you for the follow. Resets OP, thank you for the follow, man. Spumoni, I know who you are. Thanks for the support. Mad Viking, thank you for being sane enough to follow me. And Trostic, thank you for the follow. Toxic, my man, thank you for the support. Lanzinator, thank you for supporting me, man. T-Bone, appreciate the support. Thank you for the follow. SCSS, appreciate the follow. Villar is back 7. Appreciate you, man. Thank you for following me. Hiroi, I hope I pronounced that right. Thank you for the follow. Iced Macchiato, thank you for following me. Motivation, I love you, man. Thank you for following. Penguin Power, the penguin himself, thank you for following me. Alec, thanks for the follow, man. The Real Dingus, the realest dingus, thank you for following. Boston 113, East Coast represent, thank you for the follow. Code Pink Music, that is my cousin. Shout out, check out his music, fantastic. Thank you for the follow, man. Knuckles 524, love Sonic, thank you for the follow. Psycho Gasser, all right, thank you for the follow. Dookie Boy, well Dookie, thank you for the follow. A random Twitch chatter, you're not random in this heart, thank you for the follow. Mr. Pouty Teddy, thank you for following me. And lastly, Resin FB, appreciate the follow, man. We are at 44 followers now, 6 more, and we're an affiliate. Again, thank you so much for the support, guys. I'm new to this journey. Any sort of likes, comments, or subscriptions really go far for the channel on this stage. So if you do appreciate what I'm putting together, would love to see that support. Thanks again for watching. Until next time.